A vast country, numerous ethnic groups, diverse traditions, and lifestyles inevitably led to the formation of several unspoken categories of people within the Soviet army who were treated with hostility or even outright hatred. The reasons for this hostility are easy to understand. Most soldiers were strictly required by regulations to perform their military duties on a daily basis: drill, guard duty, patrols, physical training, and work in the unit. But there was a special caste, the Golden Caste, as they were called. These soldiers did not know the weight of boots on forced marches, did not stand guard for days on end, and did not carry logs on their shoulders. They had completely different duties, and among them, the bread cutters occupied a special place. The bread cutters were considered almost untouchable because it was through their hands that the main value for a soldier passed: food. In one of the books, a former soldier bitterly describes how theft took place in the army, and the bread cutter was a central figure here. He always had bread, even when there was a catastrophic shortage in the barracks. But the situation with butter was particularly cunning. According to the regulations, each soldier was entitled to his own portion of butter. A special cylindrical iron syringe dispenser was used for this purpose. After filling the syringe to the required amount, the bread cutter squeezed it onto the soldier's plate. However, theft was literally measured in millimeters. The bread cutter, acting unnoticed, would underfill the syringe by 1 or 2 millimeters of butter. It might seem like a trifle, but considering that there were dozens of soldiers in a company, each serving ended up with a decent amount of extra butter. Some particularly cunning bread cutters went even further. They managed to wind a thin wire around the syringe limiter so that the dispenser never reached the full norm. As a result, instead of the prescribed 15 grams of oil, soldiers received, for example, 14. 1 gram is insignificant, 2 grams is also trivial, but if dozens of such shortfalls accumulated every day, the bread cutter could have his own supply of oil, which was enough not only for sandwiches with tea, but also for profitable exchange with other soldiers. It was extremely difficult, and often impossible, to catch a bread cutter in such cunning and almost jeweler-like theft. Officers were not going to take milligram scales with them during the control weighing to check every piece of butter or gram of bread. Everything looked so insignificant that formally there was nothing to complain about. On one piece, the bread cutter cut a little less than necessary; on another, he didn't add enough crumbs, and somewhere the amount of butter was a millimeter less. But if you added up all these little things across the entire company or battalion, it amounted to a significant amount. Take it and use it. White bread was especially prized, as there was always a shortage of it in the army, and it was most often the item that was skimped on. As a result, the bread cutter almost always had illegal surpluses for himself or for the right people. It is not surprising that among the soldiers he was contemptuously and maliciously called a thief-in-law behind his back. After all, he always had illegal food that was inaccessible to ordinary soldiers. In the eyes of his fellow soldiers, the bread cutter embodied the injustice of army life. One had access to an extra piece, while another had to be content with his meager ration and finish the last crust. In the Navy, this position was considered privileged. The bread cutter was not chosen at random from among the sailors, but only from those who were particularly close to the command or enjoyed the trust of the senior officers. It was almost an elite caste that existed separately from the rank and file. His main duty was officially a simple one: to divide the bread into equal portions. But everyone understood that in practice, this equality always seemed deceptive. To a hungry soldier who was constantly short of food, any piece of bread seemed smaller than it should be. Because of this, the bread cutter was always quietly hated in the barracks, although few dared to openly antagonize him. After all, he controlled such a valuable wealth. Many even secretly dreamed of being in his place, so that they could dispose of bread and butter themselves, and at the same time gain a little power over others. The bread cutter also had a special privilege in the distribution of additional rations. Most often, he left the best pieces or extra grams for the senior soldiers, playing along with the army hierarchy. In this way, he strengthened his position. The old-timers covered and protected him, while the young soldiers just gritted their teeth in anger. Only a select few could become friends with this person, and most often they were fellow countrymen, those who served from the same region, the same village, or even the same street. This created a whole circle of close associates around the bread cutter, a kind of small court in a large army family. And the work of a clerk in the Soviet army was considered a job for white-collar workers. While most soldiers exhausted themselves with marches on the parade ground, hours of running in gas masks, and mandatory rapid disassembly and assembly of weapons, there was a whole range of less romantic but extremely difficult duties. Cleaning dirty dishes in the dining room, washing floors in the barracks, cleaning toilets, and raking garbage on the unit's grounds. All this fell on the shoulders of the privates, but the bread cutters, like the clerks, were not involved in such activities. Naturally, this caused envy and irritation among those who faced dirty and exhausting work every day. Clerks occupied a special place in this system. They were also disliked in the Soviet army, but for a different, more hidden nature of their activities. The soldiers did not understand what exactly they were doing. Sitting in headquarters, writing something, scribbling papers, compiling reports, drafting various notes and instructions. Their work was a closed sphere, inaccessible to outsiders. An ordinary soldier never had the right to look into a folder with reports, where his name could well appear in connection with some misconduct or disciplinary violation. The clerk, on the other hand, knew everything that passed through the commander's hands: who had been punished, who was on the special list, who was to be punished for a violation or deprived of leave. But despite his knowledge of army secrets, the clerk was not allowed to share this information with his comrades. Moreover, it was his duty to maintain complete silence, which made him a semi-mysterious figure and therefore even more annoying to others. At the same time, the clerk's service was in many ways privileged. His time was not regulated as strictly as for the rest. He could get up later and go to bed when he finished copying papers, rather than strictly on cue when the entire barracks jumped up and hurriedly put on their military uniforms. He had his own rhythm of life, which seemed like an incredible luxury in army conditions. Of course, the clerks sometimes got it too. The commander, irritated by something or dissatisfied with the company's service, would first take out his dissatisfaction on the clerk. He could lose his temper, yell, make him rewrite documents dozens of times, or sit for hours over reports. But the clerks silently endured these insults, knowing full well that their position remained one of the best and warmest in the Soviet army. And no matter how much their colleagues despised them, no one voluntarily agreed to give up such a position. Informers were also disliked in the army. Those who dared to complain to an officer about harassment by their colleagues or report a violation fell into this despised category. A single incident was enough for a soldier to be forever branded a snitch. His reputation was ruined forever and irrevocably on that very day. Anyone could punish a snitch, a conscript, an old soldier, or a young soldier, regardless of their length of service. Such people were given the dirtiest and most exhausting work: cleaning toilets, carrying coal, cleaning cesspools, whitewashing walls, or taking out the trash. They were deprived of the right to choose, could not refuse or protest, because the entire soldier community was against them. In those units where the so-called criminal order took root, the fate of the informer became even more tragic. There, they might not limit themselves to extra duties or mockery. The person was simply put down, turned into an outcast for many months of service. After that, his life in the army became unbearable. He lost respect, was treated worse than an enemy, and even new recruits who had just arrived at the unit understood that they were dealing with a marked person with whom they should have nothing to do. In the army, snitching was considered a shameful and ignoble act, a real betrayal of one's comrades. The soldier circle was based on unspoken rules: endure, keep quiet, and suffer deprivation along with everyone else. Anyone who broke these rules was automatically excluded from the group and found themselves alone. Therefore, informers had the worst life of all, feared every day of service, and knew that even the slightest attempt to justify themselves would only worsen their situation. I remember one such snitch well. The guy's name was Seryoga. He seemed normal, and at first everyone got along with him. But once, after another joke by the older soldiers, they made him scrub the toilet for the whole company at night. He couldn't take it anymore and went to complain to the officer. He told everything as it was and named names. And with that, he signed his own death warrant. The very next day, everyone in the barracks found out that he had gone to bow down. It didn't matter whether the officer himself blabbed or someone guessed. Secrets in the army always became public knowledge. From that moment on, Seryoga ceased to be himself. No one listened to him, no one invited him to play cards, no one shared their last cigarette or piece of bread with him. Anyone could punish him, regardless of their length of service. Even the young guys, who just yesterday had been getting slaps on the back of the head from the old-timers, could now openly order him to wash the floors, carry water, or clean the wash basins. He obeyed silently because he understood that resistance was futile. And at that time, criminal rules were being imposed in our unit. Everything was strict there. Hierarchy, nicknames, their own laws. And in this system, there was no place for a snitch. Sergei was quickly put down. After that, he became a nobody. Even the young guys had power over him. They could kick him, insult him, or make him do the most disgusting work. The worst thing was not that they bullied him, but that he was left alone. The army was based on teamwork, on the fact that you had comrades by your side, even when things got tough. But he no longer had any comrades. At evening roll call, he stood with his eyes downcast, sat in the corner at breakfast, ate silently, and didn't talk to anyone. They hated him, but deep down, I felt sorry for him. Being a snitch meant serving not 2 years, but an eternity, with every day turning into hard labor.